that have been put through a wood chipper. There's a wide variety of these available online, with everything from cognac barrel chips to red wine, tequila, and more. These will each impart a slightly different flavor and come in different levels of roasted, so you can really mix and match to get the exact flavor you want. The first time we tried this, we used a normal, dirt-cheap jewelry cleaner and some cognac barrel chips. We of course wanted to see how distilled spirits behaved, but also wondered how other liquids behaved as well. So we tried some vodka, apple cider, and some heavy cream for something really out of left field. To get started, all we did was fill a jar 3/4 of the way with our test liquid and then add about a 1/4 cup of cognac barrel chips to each jar. The little jewelry cleaner can only hold a single jar and do 5 minutes at a time, so we cycled between each jar and just kept hitting the button until all three had gone through 30 minutes of sonic exposure. The vodka was by far the most different appearance-wise and had taken on a caramel brown color which had intensified after each 5-minute cycle. The cider and cream were harder to see a change though. To make these drinkable, one at a time they were strained to remove the wood chips. Now let's give them a taste test to see how they turned out. I filmed this first part of the video while I was in Indiana visiting my friend Gabriel, so here we are both giving our freshly sonicated tests a try.
Hi friends, glad you could join us. Welcome to another episode of Oh God, why are you putting that in your mouth? I'm your host, Gabriel. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we have our liquid original.
Yeah, so plain, normal, New Amsterdam vodka.
Yep.
Fresh out of the bottle.
Fresh out of the bottle. And we're just going to take a little sip to kind of,
Assay.
set it up.
Yeah.
And then...
so, let me give it a smell.
Yeah, by the way, this is the Oh God, the Milk bowl.
Okay, heard. Okay. I mean, it smells like vodka. Not dissimilar from rubbing alcohol.
This is the... I'm going to clean my mouth out.
It tastes like vodka. It's not a lot of taste to it.
Yeah.
Well, mostly just burny and alcohol taste. It doesn't really. There's nothing. There's no flavor.
Hello and welcome.
Yeah, it's burnt
You have
vodka.
been placed in
Yeah,
aggravated
put it in a
rehabilitation
cocktail.
facility for violation of local law.
Taking a big huff of vodka just isn't something anyone ever does. No one's like, oh,
yeah,
such a great bouquet.
Yeah, no, it's because it's vodka. It's basically alcohol.
So this doesn't actually. I mean, there's like a weird little tanniny kind of smell, but it doesn't actually smell.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit extra, but yeah, it still mostly just smells like vodka.
However, our color is
night and day. Like, absolutely night and day. There's no... It's literally no difference. So, okay. Let's give it a
Ready
start.
to take the next step on the road to
You can't
rehabilitation?
don't say anything. I want to be surprised. Not even gonna look at your face.
The wrongs you've done. Any negative can become a positive with a little bit of work.
It does kind of have that, like, barrel-aged-ish to it. But, like...
I feel like. Also, we're working with vodka here.
Yeah. It's not really a tasty spirit to start with.
I think the vodka's too clean, actually. I don't think it's reacting with the other things that are in the oak chips.
I think that's... But I mean, there's like a caramely-ish note to it. You do get the like oaky...
There's also a little sulfury note in there, though.
Yeah, a
I'm
little
not a
bit.
fan.
Keep it going, people.
Build up to drinking milk.
I know, not. But no, I mean, it does kind of have that like reminiscent of whiskey-ish to it.
Well, that's...
But considering that started as vodka and now there's actually some extra flavor in there, I'd say that's...
See, this is the thing. Okay, so here's the thing. If you added...
Please direct your attention towards the front
I mean, at
gates.
the very
One of
least,
our guests has
this
completed
is
their rehabilitation
great
and is being
ingredient
released.
for like a cocktail.
Let's give them a
Like, when
round of
it's taken
applause.
vodka from
Good luck back in the world.
and now you are drunk and you're drinking super juice to like you can actually build on it. It's like it's something you could like work into a cocktail. It's not solidly not that. Okay, so this is the apple cider. So it got a little bit darker. It got a little bit of color.
I'm actually interested, because like I'm starting to think that it's also the things in the liquid interacting
Yeah.
with it.
It makes me wonder like what else we could put in here other than just the straight wood chips. Like if there's something else to kind of tie it, like to give it more to
Quinoa. Amaranth. No, seriously though, you could probably put lots of stuff.
But yeah, so it's I mean it's pretty good cider.
Yep.
It's
Some
tasty.
Michigan apple cider.
Yeah, Michigan apple cider. It's tasty. It's solid. And let's open this monstrosity. Yeah, I'm excited. This is gonna be good. I'm more excited about this than I am about the milk. Okay.
No sense of expiration.
I mean, the smell on this one better. It's like, it's closer to almost apple pie-ish. Like,
It is.
that's kind of cool. I'm excited. Let's try
I'm
this.
getting notes of October 29th.
You mean Halloween the 29th?
Yeah.
A bag of this stuff. It was solid. It was
Oh my god,
like
I want it so much.
cocktail time.
All right.
Little lemon juice.
I got this.
Okay, we'll make a cocktail. We'll come back.
Before we get to cocktail time, because we were so thrilled with the results, as soon as I got home, I wanted to really put the process through its paces. To start, I want to try some alcohols that have a little more to them than vodka. So this time, we're going to try a couple different wines, some rum, and for a wild card, some coffee. The wines aren't necessarily a great test though, as I bought the wine from a store and had already been aged a bit. A more fair test would be to start with a wine that had been freshly fermented and fined to remove particulate, but otherwise hadn't been aged. The coffee I'll be using today was actually provided by the sponsor of today's video, Trade Coffee. I love coffee, but I've always been picky when it came to finding the right one for me. Otherwise I end up just drowning it in milk and sugar rather than enjoying the coffee itself. And also, I love baking with coffee, so if you don't get the right kind, the flavor is totally off. Never make muffins with instant coffee. So Trade is great, because on their site they have this little quiz to match you with a coffee that you'll enjoy, and seem to have something for everyone. They work with 50 awesome roasters, so that each order is roasted fresh, and have a great selection of ethically sourced coffee. I ended up going with a pre-ground coffee called John Brown, and an unground bag of one called Huck. I wanted something not too dark, so it has a nice smooth flavor with minimal bitterness. For today's experiment, I'm going to be making some cold brew with the John Brown using my French press. We did a bit of experimenting off camera with ultrasonic coffee, and making cold brew and then treating it with the wood chips is definitely the way to go. If you try and ultrasound the coffee while the coffee grounds are still in the liquid, it gets super bitter and unpleasant, even with really nice coffee to start with. Also, I've just always preferred cold brew as you get that full rich flavor with minimal bitterness. Trade is giving the first 100 people to click the link in the description 30% off their first coffee, or use coupon code ThoughtEmporium at checkout. It really is great coffee, so if you're a coffee drinker and looking to find your perfect bag, Trade is a great place to look. While the cold brew is sitting in the fridge overnight, we can work on our other liquids. Something I didn't mention was that this whole process isn't something we came up with, and was based on several research papers which I've linked to in the description. Not only that, the professional brewers and winemakers are legitimately starting to work this method into their production runs because it's so powerful. But one thing our initial test was missing was aeration. For a lot of the reactions to take place, you need oxygen to get into the liquid. In a barrel or bottle, oxygen slowly diffuses in over many years. But since we're condensing the process down, we need to supply lots of oxygen for our short 30-minute runs. To do that, I'm going to be using a little peristaltic pump and some silicone tubing to suck up the liquid as it's being sonicated and allow it to drip back in, mixing it with the air. To make this easier, I'm using one of these silicone fermenting lids that are meant to fit on the mason jars I'm using. I can just jam the tubing through the hole on the top, and it holds everything in place while preventing any of the liquids from splashing out or evaporating, while also letting a bit of fresh air in through the gaps. Back in Canada, it was a little harder to get barrel chips, but what was readily available was just plain oak chips. These don't have the benefit of absorbing compounds from previous batches of liquid that was stored in them, like the cognac chips, but they still have lots of good flavor. To help bring those flavors out, I laid some of the chips on a sheet tray and threw them in the oven with the broiler on for 5 to 10 minutes until they darkened up. This mimics the charring of the inside of the barrel that a traditional whiskey barrel, for example, has. However, there were red wine barrel chips available, so I also picked up some of those. This is going to be a lot of hours of sonicating for all of these tests, so let's just go through the basic process. First, we fill the jar about halfway up with our liquid. Here I'm using Bacardi white rum. Then we add our quarter cup of wood chips. Here I'm using the toasted oak chips that we just made. Next, we add our special lid such that the input tube reaches into the liquid. Then screw on the top, turn on the pump, and pop the whole assembly into the ultrasound. Once it's all loaded up, we just set the timer for 30 minutes and let it rip. When the timer is up, I turned off the pump and pulled the suction tube out so that all the remaining liquid drained back into the jar. Then, chips and all, the liquid was transferred to my French press so that I could strain it out. The jar was given a quick rinse to make sure there's no wood bits left over, and then the liquid was strained back into the jar. I followed the same basic protocol for all of the liquids, and when they were done, I'd mark the top with a bit of tape so I could keep track of which were the ultrasonic ones. One thing I didn't experiment with was temperature, and some reports have said that heating the liquid to 60 to 80 degrees can make the process work even better. But I figured with the aeration and all the different chips and liquids, that would just be far too tedious to test. Here's all the test samples next to a control of untreated liquid. We've got the rum done with both the red wine chips and the toasted oak chips, red wine done with red wine chips, white wine with toasted oak chips, some apple cider again, this time with the red wine chips, and finally the coffee, again done with the red wine chips. Just like the vodka, the rum had had the most dramatic change, going from clear to caramel brown, and there was a noticeable difference in color between the two versions. The coffee darkened up a bit, which I thought was interesting. The red wine looked identical, but the white wine got a little bit of color to it, and the apple cider also darkened slightly. Now it's again time for a taste test, but this time my friend Nigel, or as you probably know him, Nile Red, is going to help me out so I can have an unbiased taste tester.
Okay, so the bottom one is the control.
Okay.
And the top is the treated one.
Attention, attention. Please direct your attention towards the front gates.
We're gonna start
One
with
of
red
our
wine.
guests has completed their rehabilitation and is being released. Let's give them a round of applause. Move on back in the world, civilian.
I hate wine so much.
Okay. And this is the modified.
Tastes similar.
Okay.
It's way more bitter.
Okay. Here, let me give these ones a try. Okay, so this is the control.
Know that even while serving your sentence, you have already begun to help make you
Tastes like red wine.
thanks to
Okay. Now the
when you pleasure cares
the one we messed with.
the percentage of far more goes towards helping those less fortunate. Together.
Welcome back. You were incapacitated during an incident in the facility. Do not worry. You will make a full recovery.
It did taste
We hope
different.
that this
I thought
doesn't
it was
reflect poorly on your time here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of mellowed the flavor a little bit. It was like, I don't know. It's because I mean the idea is aging, right? Like, so it's still gonna taste like wine. So it's just regular, normal, boring. Now cider. This is the oak treated one. It's also, you know, give it a whiff. Yeah, it's just cheap, boring, normal apple cider.
It's definitely different.
Right. It's got like it's got some like extra flavor to it, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't tried this.
No, it's like
Ready
I thought
to
it was
take the
gonna
next
taste
step on the road to rehabilitation?
Fine
Time. Attention, attention. Please direct your attention towards the front gates.
No,
One
it
of our
just tastes- I
guests
don't know
has
how to describe
completed their rehabilitation and is being released. Let's give them a round
I
of
wasn't expecting
applause.
much.
Good luck back in the world, civilian.
Oh, I like that way better. I really like that
I don't
better.
know if I actually like it more,
Really?
but it's not bad.
It's not bad.
It's just different.
It is different. I don't know. It's like it's been sitting in a barrel. Which I kind of like. It was these chips. It was the red wine barrel chip.
Barbecue and smoking.
Yeah, red wine and cider. I kind of like. I'm kind of about it. And so the reason I went with rum this time, the first time we did this, we did vodka.
Okay.
And vodka is as harsh as clear spirits go. Whereas rum I find has a little bit more, not by much, but it has a little bit more flavor to it. It's less like drinking rubbing alcohol and more like a drink. So
This is like a control.
yeah, this is a roll.
Okay.
I did two different kinds of barrel chips this time. So I did the red. This is the red wine, and the top one is oak chips that I roasted in the oven. So try the plain rum first. Here. So you know it's got that like harsh alcohol taste, but there's a little bit of like sweetness to it. There's a little bit of it's not like drinking rubbing alcohol the way vodka is.
It's close though.
It's close, but it's not quite that thing.
It's the one that you made.
Personally, I really like it, but I don't know. It's got more flavor to it, right? Like
Oh no, for sure.
yeah, it's
Like it's not just before, like you said, it was like very close to vodka,
Right.
and now it's like.
I mean, it definitely. So I like dark rum personally.
I honestly I don't even know if I've ever had dark rum.
Fair enough.
So I have no
Your baseline
context
is
on
vodka.
anything.
I mean,
All I drink is if I ever drink it's vodka
Fair.
and maybe tequila. That's all I have.
okay. Okay, so this one I actually haven't tried yet.
I feel like I'm gonna like that one better.
Welcome back. You were incapacitated during an incident in the facility. Do not worry. You will make a full recovery. We hope that this does not reflect poorly on your time here.
Interesting. It's definitely different though. Like the taste is completely different.
No, it's completely different. It's just, but it's
entirely
like
different. That's really interesting.
it's completely different. And like, sorry,
I drink it. It's not bad.
like I said, I don't like alcohol, so I'm biased for everything.
Right, no, it's
So
not.
it's kind of like if I do drink,
Right. You want to not hit. You
the
just
thing
want
that is the least offensive is what I'll take. And I find personally that it adds like an extra bit of weirdness to it.
Fair enough. I feel like this is one of the like if we were to compare. So
The other one I like more.
Okay.
The other one was like
Interesting.
woody. I felt it had like a nice.
Yeah, I mean,
little
this has like a
addition.
floral, like fruity note because it's from the red wine, right? So
I would say that the
almost
other
has
one-
that like red wininess, just the slightest bit. Okay,
So the first one is cider.
no, this is white wine.
Oh, it's white wine.
Yeah, I already did the cider.
Yeah, I was thinking of like alcoholic cider.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
So this is white wine, and I did this one with the toasted chips,
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I.
which you like more.
Yeah, but I
You
think
like
the difference
more
is in the
in
hard
the-
alcohol. It pulls out.
Yeah,
A
I mean,
lot
it's a
more.
purer note. There's not other stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I did the wines, just to see how they would kind of behave. All right, so let's try that. This is just like cheap shit white wine.
Okay.
It smells like white wine. Tastes like white wine.
I actually like white wine a lot more than red. I find red is too.
Too punchy.
Yeah, too strong.
Yeah, I mean it's not bad. It is totally fine white wine.
Like I haven't had white wine in a long time.
Mhm.
I can actually have a glass. I've been served a glass of red and I just couldn't.
Can't do it.
I can't do it.
Yeah, that's fair. Everybody has their preference.
Yeah.
That is totally fair. Okay.
Definitely smells different.
Yeah, it's kind of got that like barrel smell to it. It's weird taking a shot of wine.
It definitely tastes.
I like.
It tastes like a barrel.
I mean, it tastes barrel aged. Like.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of has that like toasty.
Actually, I like the regular.
You like it plain?
Yeah, because again, like I said, I think the thing I don't like alcohol for is like the bitterness.
Mhm.
Generally,
Right.
like the whatever, it stands out to me, and I find that the added stuff adds a bit more to that.
Okay.
But I don't think it tastes bad.
Right.
Just for me, that's why
I kinda like it.
That's
I mean-
why I prefer the original because it was very
Right.
mild. But this is a little bit more,
Interesting. I mean, it's not bad.
but it's not bad.
It's
It's
like
just different.
It's just different.
Yeah.
It's just different. I like it personally. Like it does. Like. I mean,
I like it a lot more than the red wine overall.
Right. I mean, that's fair. I think it's interesting. I don't know if I would necessarily like have this as my like default protocol if I'm making a wine, but as like a thing to try with a wine to like tweak the flavor a little bit, I think would be really interesting. So the last one, I think it's gonna be good. Okay, so first just the normal plain cold brew. I mean, like beyond the fact that this one's cloudy, there is a bit of a color difference. Like I feel like it's a little darker. Yeah, it's a plain Jane cold brew. Smells like coffee. Tastes like coffee.
Tastes exactly like coffee.
Tastes like, I mean, if it didn't taste like coffee, I'd be concerned. But no, it tastes like good, fine, good coffee. Like as these things go, like I mean, yeah, it's cold brew, but as these things go, I feel like it's perfectly fine coffee. Like
No, it's good.
I mean, I'm excited to drink it. That's for sure.
Okay,
Okay,
now for
for the. Maybe we left it in a barrel. Maybe we ultrasounded it. Who knows?
Just smell it first. So like
The coffee smell is very overpowering, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a different note in the oak.
I feel like I can't tell the difference. Maybe there's something slightly different. It's not like the other ones
Oh,
where
it's real mild. It's real.
like the other ones I could clearly tell,
Yeah.
whereas this is like
I mean,
it
like-
kind of just smells like.
right, like
slightly
if you're
different
comparing like the rum, right? Like you think there's a difference.
No, I know. But I'm saying that like it was very. You smelled
Yeah.
it and it was clear, whereas
Yeah.
this kind of smells
Mostly like
almost
coffee.
the same.
Yeah, mostly like coffee with that like tiniest little hint of there's something else in it.
Yeah.
Right.
It definitely tastes different.
Yeah.
But it's like. A second.
It's mellower.
Yeah.
It's mellower.
Well, I mean,
I
I found in the other ones.
Mhm.
You did this for 30 minutes.
yeah, they're all
Okay,
very
it's all the same time. Yeah.
It's all the same.
So it's like I felt in the other ones that the woodiness or whatever the flavorful
Yeah.
oakiness was kind of overpowering, whereas here kind of like blends in.
Yeah, I think it's because coffee is such a like a punchy flavor that like it
I know. I find
it
that
can't
just
dominate like
yeah.
like the oak can't be overpowering like it was with the white wine because the white wine was really overpowering. Like it was like you completely lost that like white wine flavor and
Mhm.
mostly tasted like barrel. Whereas with this, coffee is such a like punchy flavor that it really just kind of like blends in and just kind of like. I mean, so the ultrasound seems to pretty consistently mellow out bitter flavors.
Yeah.
So you like it's that
Going back and forth. Sorry, going back and forth. Having this one again,
Mhm.
it does taste like there's a little bit of like I don't know, a stronger like undertone.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is very
It's
smooth.
nice, it's
I feel like
smooth,
it's smooth.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best word for it. Like it's
But it also tastes like coffee.
yeah.
It doesn't taste like
Yeah.
I don't. If you gave this
It's
to me,
not barrel with some coffee beans.
yeah,
in it.
yeah.
It's,
Like,
it's
the other
like,
ones I could tell that there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Whereas if you made this for me and just gave it to me,
You'd be like, yeah, it's
I
good
would
coffee.
think that it was coffee.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. Like it's definitely good. I wouldn't like I don't know. It's definitely not worth the effort to like do this every morning. I mean, not for the least of the reasons that
But I mean, if you're doing
Like-
cold brew, you could do a huge batch,
you could
run it, and then.
like just be set for the week. Especially if you have a bigger ultrasound.
But I don't know.
Like,
You say it's not worth it, but I feel like
you're kind of into it. it's just like, personally, I hate the noise of the ultrasound, so like it wouldn't be worth it to like wake up every morning and then like gotta turn the ultrasound on for half an hour.
That's what I said. I said if you run a huge batch.
But if you were to do it in bulk though, like especially if I think if you let this brew a little longer too, like let it brew a little longer, then do your big batch, and then come back. I think it's actually not bad. Like almost be worth it.
Finally, let's actually use some of these concoctions and let's make a cocktail.
Spilling. You're gonna start out with spilling.
Start out with spilling. Go with 2 ounces of our vodka and splash of maple syrup. Take that edge off. Probably gonna have to use all of this.
Yeah. Worth it. only took a day.
We'll make more.
Only took a day of sonicating to make that little pint. There's pips in there, yeah. Oh my god, this smells so good.
Yeah.
Oh my god, this smells so good. Okay. I mean, all the like oaky, barrely, caramely, appley flavors like are like they mix real nice. Okay, fine. I gotta say, for like a random one-day experiment, this was solid. So, okay, what do we call the cocktail?
The oak and moose.
The oak and moose? I like it.
It's maple syrup and oak chips and apple cider.
It's good though.
Cool, you can go now.
Dismissed.
All in all, this was a really fun experiment, and the results were both fascinating and delicious. If you make your own alcohols, or even if you just want to put a fun spin on your favorite drinks, I'd highly recommend giving this a try. An ultrasonic bath like this is pretty cheap, and I, for one, am very happy to add it to my cooking arsenal. If you end up giving this a try, tweet the results at me. There's so many possibilities, I'm really excited to see what you all come up with. Maybe try other wood varieties too, not just oak. Or throw in some spices to make spiced rum in only a few minutes. Before I close out, another quick thank you to our sponsor Trade Coffee, and remember that if you click the link in the description or use coupon code ThoughtEmporium, the first 100 people will get 30% off their first order. Finally, I need to say a huge thank you to my amazing patrons, channel members, and supporters on Ko-fi that make these videos possible. Your support means the world to me, and I can't thank you all enough. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe and ring the bell to see when I post new videos. To see these projects and more long before they make it into videos, head over to my other social media pages, especially Instagram and Twitter. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time. If I served dinner on this antique dinner plate, would you eat off it? It seems harmless, albeit a mildly gaudy color, but before you give me your answer, I'm just gonna casually place this radiation detector on it. Yeah, not so enthused to eat off it now, are you? This crazy thing is a piece of Fiesta brand ceramic from somewhere in the early to mid-1900s. Back before we really understood the risks of radiation and heavy metal poisoning, Fiesta and other ceramic manufacturers at the time maintained a supply of uranium minerals for making these bright orange dishes and crockery. The glaze is about 14% by weight uranium oxide, making it both radioactive and likely to leach large amounts of radioactive heavy metal into your food. Delicious. And if you had the whole set, the amount of radioactive radon gas coming off of it actually begins to become a concern. Eventually their uranium stockpiles were confiscated, but not because of the safety hazard. Oh no, this was America before safety was invented. Instead, the American military wanted it so they could rapidly redecorate the Nevada desert, and parts of Japan. Anyway, these antiques still remain pretty radioactive and actually become more radioactive over time. This all got me thinking, if these are radioactive, could I take an X-ray using one of them? Even if I had to leave the film on here for a few days, it should work in theory. This kicked off a rabbit hole of experimentation that included buying X-ray film and developer, intensifying screens, and piles of lead, glass, and other materials. We built vacuum tubes, a working X-ray machine, and accidentally demonstrated some fundamental properties of physics that I'm particularly excited to show you later. And of course, we X-rayed every cool thing we could find in the lab. There is lots to do, so let's get started. Now, this may seem strange, but uranium itself isn't actually that radioactive. Its half-life, the time it takes for half of the material to have undergone decay, is actually extremely long, like between 700 million and 4.5 billion years long. So a piece of uranium today would be nearly indistinguishable in weight in, say, 1,000 years. Only about a microgram of uranium would have decayed. However, when a bit of uranium does decay, it's not like it just evaporates into a cloud of protons. That would be very violent. No, instead it just loses small amounts of mass at a time, going through a series of decays to lighter elements called its daughter products. These decay products are much more radioactive, with half-lives measured in anything from years down to a few milliseconds. So the likelihood that any atom of them is decaying at any one moment is much higher than the parent uranium isotope. When a piece of uranium sits around, these daughter products start to build up, and so the sample will become more radioactive over time, which for our uses is actually to our benefit. Now, when I say that this plate is radioactive, while true, it's a little imprecise. There's actually many different kinds of radiation, and this plate is emitting several of them. But rather than just listing them, I think I'm just going to show you. This is our cloud chamber. If you've seen our shorts, you've probably seen it before because we've put all kinds of things in here, but if not, it's probably one of my favorite tools to show off. In the bottom, we load a bunch of dry ice on the spring-loaded platform, and the main chamber is then placed on top. The felt at the top is moistened with 99% ethanol, and everything is allowed to cool down. Eventually, the super cold metal base will begin to supersaturate the air above it with alcohol vapor, and when it's in this state, any charged particle of radiation passing through will trigger the alcohol to condense, leaving a smoky trail. Since the whole plate isn't going to fit in here, I'm going to use this chunk of plate that I've had in my collection for many years. This was one of the first pieces of Fiestaware I ever got my hands on and was sent to me by a friend. When I place the little tile in the cloud chamber, it takes a second for things to cool down enough to work properly, but then look what starts to happen. We start to see thick trails coming off the top and sides, and the whole chamber becomes a roiling fog of charged particles whizzing around. This is only a fraction of the radiation coming off of this, but it still lets you see the variety of trail types. The thick and straight ones are alpha particles, literally a helium nucleus chunk that gets ejected from the uranium core. They're not very penetrating, so your skin actually stops most of these. They're only dangerous if they're being emitted inside of you where they can smash through your cells. The thin, wibbly-wobbly trails are beta particles, which are just high-speed electrons. These are more penetrating and will go through even thin bits of metal. When the chamber is empty, the skinny electron trails are easier to see. This is all the background radiation that surrounds us all the time. The extremely long electron trails are from high-energy particles coming mainly from space, though we only see the ones that are moving horizontally through the thin layer of fog. Things moving vertically would only basically leave a dot. Rather than putting the tile back in here, I'm just going to quickly replace it with this weird thing so I can demonstrate something. It may look like a conference badge, but this is actually a Quack Health product that we talked about in a previous video. It is filled with thorium dioxide powder, another radioactive element, and is the most radioactive thing that I own. And this stupid thing was sold with the intention that the user should wear it 24/7. As with the tile, we see lots of alpha and beta particles, though you may notice something strange. There are pairs of alpha particles that seem to be produced away from the badge. Often they show up as this V-shaped pattern, and if you watch closely, one of the particles is always produced ever so slightly after the first one, with a small gap in between the ends of the trails. What's crazy is that we can know exactly what this atom was, what it came from, and its exact isotope just from this pattern. This must be radon-220 gas being emitted from the thorium in the badge. Its half-life is only 55 seconds, but the thing it decays into, polonium-216, is even more unstable, with a half-life of only 150 milliseconds. So what we're seeing with these forked trails is the first decay and ejection of an alpha particle, a time delay as the atom flies a short distance, and then a second decay and emission of a second alpha particle. The radon actually builds up so quickly that it takes a few minutes after removing the pendant for the fork decays to stop and all the radon to either decay away or leave the box. Just imagine wearing this thing all day long, breathing this garbage in. Ick. If you want to know more about why this thing even exists, I've put a card to the video where we tested it and products like it that were being sold on Amazon. Now, with both of these samples, we see lots of alpha and beta decay, but one thing we aren't seeing directly are any X-rays or gamma rays, even though both samples are releasing plenty of them. Unlike alpha and beta particles, X-rays aren't charged particles, and instead are a type of electromagnetic radiation, basically a high-energy form of light. Just like with visible light, we can't see it while it's in flight. We only see photons that bounce off of something and then hit our eyes. With X-rays it's the same, though X-rays have so much energy that when they hit atoms, they usually send electrons flying away as debris. So while we can't see the X-rays themselves, we can see the debris they kick up. If we zoom out on the tile a little bit, we see a roiling mess of charged particles. Much of this is the result of X-rays coming off of the plate and smashing into things, sending them flying. But that manifests as the same sort of particle trails we're already seeing, so it's not very easy to tell them apart. But we'll come back to this in a bit to see what X-rays look like on their own. Also, just to quickly clear something up, X-rays and gamma rays are the same thing, and the names can be used interchangeably. They're both names for extremely high energy wavelengths of light past ultraviolet. During the history of nuclear science, there were groups studying different ways radiation could be produced. There was one group studying minerals and the natural decay of elements, and there was another group playing with high voltage and vacuum tubes. Each group independently discovered a very high energy type of electromagnetic wave, similar to optical light but extremely penetrating and ionizing. The mineral nerds called them gamma rays, and the electronics nerds called them X-rays, and this has been a source of undue confusion ever since. But they're the same thing. Some people might be pedantic and insist on where they come from matters, but if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it must be made out of wood and is therefore a witch.
Well, she turned me into a newt. A newt. Got better.
Now, that does bring us to the initial question that started all of this. Can we use a hunk of radioactive material to take an X-ray? And the answer is a resounding yes. In fact, for a lot of industrial applications, it was much easier to just use a hunk of extremely radioactive cesium or cobalt in a special box than it is to lug all the equipment needed to make X-rays electrically. Our plate, while it is radioactive, in truth isn't that radioactive. While I dislike handling it, holding the plate even with bare hands for a couple of minutes is not going to hurt you at all, nor will being near it or having one of these on display. The dose is just much too low, but I certainly wouldn't want to spend extended periods hanging out with it on my lap or eating off it, especially if the glaze chips or sheds dust that ends up inside you, or leaches uranium into your food. Because of that, if we want to use the comparatively meek radiation of this plate to take an X-ray, we're potentially going to have to leave it sitting for days for enough radiation to hit the film. Speaking of which, I picked up this pile of old X-ray intensifier cassettes and a couple boxes of X-ray film online so that way we can take our X-ray images. After the last few months of optics and photography projects, this part actually felt incredibly familiar. We had to prep developer tanks and work in the dark under safe light, all of which was still set up from our experiments turning a potato into a working camera, making Cold War-era microdots, and making projection holograms with film negatives. It was a photo-filled summer, and I'd recommend checking out all of those videos if you missed them. Anyway, to take an X-ray with the plate, we initially tried to use one of the X-ray intensifying cassettes we bought, but this didn't work. So we thought that maybe it was just too thick and blocking too much of the radiation. So we ended up making a darkroom bag out of black plastic just to put the piece of film in. We made a stack of one of the X-ray film bags, then a collection of small, thin, metallic items, followed by the Fiesta plate. Since this was going to have to sit for a week or two anyway, we also doubled up and set up more items on top and another piece of film on top of that. And that's it just needs to cook. We ended up leaving it for about 2 weeks like this to make sure that enough radiation would have hit the film. While that's cooking, let's talk more about X-rays, because they have a lot more utility than just taking pictures, though we will return to taking pictures again in a second. When we want to learn about something that is emitting light, a common way to inspect it is to break the light into a rainbow with a grating and see the spectrum of colors that are in there. Gas discharge tubes, for example, give a characteristic pattern of lines based on what element is in the tube. We can actually do a similar thing for X-rays. Rather than a grating, we use a special instrument called a gamma spectrometer. To demonstrate this, I'm going to be using the same radiation detector you saw earlier. This is my Radiacode digital radiation detector, and they are actually the sponsor of this video. Rather than giving you the usual spiel, I'm just going to show you how cool this thing is. But if you want one, they're on sale at the moment for the holidays, and there's of blue light when radiation passes through it. The flashes are too dim to see individually, but here's a long exposure of a piece of a similar material called bike